She walked in at 3:02 a.m. The house was dark. I was sitting on the couch, waiting. And the moment she passed by me, I knew. It wasn't just that she was late. It was the smell. She didn't smell like home. She smelled like him. The door clicked shut behind her, soft but loud enough to echo through the silence. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to see her face. I needed to feel the truth. "Why are you still awake?" she asked, startled when she noticed me sitting there. "Long office dinner?" I replied calmly. She tossed her purse onto the chair. "Yeah, client meeting. My phone was on silent." Lies are strange. It's not the words that expose them. It's the tone. I stood up slowly and walked toward her, close enough to confirm what my instincts were screaming. That unfamiliar cologne mixed with her perfume. "Pack your things," I said quietly. "You have 15 minutes. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Stop being dramatic." But I wasn't being dramatic. This didn't begin tonight. For 3 months, her phone had been face down. The password had changed. Work emergencies had multiplied. Weekend meetings became normal, and "I'm tired" became her favorite sentence. I told myself I was overthinking. Every marriage has rough patches. Trust means not jumping to conclusions. But trust doesn't mean ignoring patterns. A week ago, I hired a private investigator, not because I wanted to end my marriage, but because I needed peace of mind. If I was wrong, I would bury my doubts forever. If I was right, well, then nights like this happen. She started walking toward the bedroom. I pulled out my phone and opened the gallery. "Before you go," I said. I held the screen up in front of her. A candlelit restaurant, a corner table, her. And sitting across from her, her boss. They weren't sitting like colleagues. Her face drained of color. "You had me followed?" she snapped. "I needed the truth," I answered, about my own life. Silence filled the room, only the ticking clock between us. "Let me explain," she whispered. "Go ahead." Her voice trembled for the first time. He pressured me. The promotion. He said if I didn't cooperate, I'd lose my job. Anger and confusion collided inside me. If she was telling the truth, she was a victim. If she was lying, she was manipulating me. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "You were already stressed. The loan, the project, everything. I didn't want to add more." I let out a hollow laugh. "Your silence destroyed me more than the truth ever could." She sat down, covering her face. The 15 minutes were ticking away. "Ask me one thing," I said, staring out the window at the empty street below. "Do you love him?" A long pause. I don't know." That was worse than yes, worse than no. Uncertainty is the loudest confession. The photo wasn't the real proof. The smell wasn't the real proof. The late-night messages weren't the real proof. Her hesitation was. When you love someone, you know. 15 minutes are up, I said quietly. She zipped her suitcase slowly, like she was waiting for me to stop her. At the door, she turned around. "You're not even gonna fight for me?" I looked at her, really looked at her. "I am," I said. "I'm fighting for myself." I opened the door. Cold air rushed in, and she walked out. The house felt painfully silent again, but for the first time in months, my mind wasn't. Sometimes betrayal doesn't explode like a bomb. Sometimes it's just a scent that doesn't belong, a hesitation that says everything, a silence that answers all your questions. It was almost 4 a.m. The sun hadn't risen yet, but somehow I felt like I finally had. The clock read 3:07 a.m., I didn't flinch. I just said calmly, "By 3:22, you'll be gone." She froze. For the first time, the confident woman I married looked like someone I didn't know at all. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock on the wall. She stepped inside, keys jangling in her hand, wearing the perfume that wasn't hers. She looked around, expecting me to yell, to cry, or to beg her to explain herself, but I didn't. I simply sat on the couch, my arms crossed, and let her sense the weight of my silence. It was heavier than any argument we'd ever had. "Where have you been?" I asked, my voice low, steady. "Just out," she replied, brushing past me as though she had every right to enter without answer. "Just out," I repeated, "and you smell like him." She stopped in her tracks, her eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossed her face. It's not what you think," she said, trying to maintain control. "Then explain it in 15 minutes, I said, glancing at the clock. "By 3:22, you pack your things, or leave, your choice." She laughed, nervous, brittle, a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You're serious?" I nodded, deadly serious. This wasn't sudden. Something had shifted between us over the past few months. Late nights, vague explanations, her phone always face down, secret meetings she couldn't tell me about. I wanted to trust her. I tried, but deep down I knew. I had stayed up late more nights than I could count, observing, questioning, piecing together the small cracks that were slowly splitting our marriage. And tonight, everything finally aligned. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't threaten, I didn't plead. I didn't need to, because control was mine, and she finally saw it. Her usual arrogance, the sense that she could manipulate any situation, evaporated when she realized I wasn't reacting like I usually did. I wasn't chasing her. I wasn't trying to save what was already broken. As she walked toward the bedroom to change, memories hit me like a storm. Our first date, her laughter echoing in a tiny cafe, the nights we stayed up talking about dreams, the times I had stayed awake making sure she got home safely, never questioning her, always trusting. And now, all of it felt fragile, shattered. I watched her from the couch. 15 minutes. That was all she had to prove herself, or to prove to me that I was done trusting. 3:10 a.m., 10 minutes left. She was sitting on the bed, fidgeting, pulling clothes out of drawers, unsure what to take. Her confidence was gone, replaced by the fear she had never shown me. I stayed silent. My presence alone was enough to make her panic. She looked at the clock and realized the countdown had begun. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it, but I knew it was him. The texts, the calls, the lies, all of it would be irrelevant now. She came back to the living room with a half-packed bag, looking at me, desperate. "You can't just kick me out," she said, almost pleading. "I don't have to," I replied. The truth already did. She dropped to the couch, close enough that I could smell the perfume again. "Look, it's complicated. I didn't mean..." I held up a hand. 15 minutes, that's your limit.
She shook her head. "Please, 15 minutes isn't enough. I can explain everything." I leaned back, calm. "Explain, or leave. But remember, the clock is ticking." I watched her eyes shift. Guilt, fear, regret. She tried to form words, but they fell apart mid-sentence. The confident, manipulative woman I had known couldn't hold her ground. She was vulnerable, exposed, and entirely human. 3:21 a.m., 1 minute left. She zipped up the last of her clothes, her hands shaking. She looked at me, a silent plea for mercy. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I didn't judge. I simply waited. 3:22 a.m. The final second passed. I stood, walked to the door, and held it open. Cold air blew in. She froze. For a moment, I thought she might throw herself at me,
try to manipulate me one last time, but she didn't. She walked through the doorway and into the night, carrying her own choices with her. I closed the door. Silence. Absolute silence. The kind that fills the spaces you didn't know were empty. For the first time in months, I could breathe without anxiety. The house, the life, the love, it wasn't gone. Only the lies had left. I sat back on the couch. My eyes landed on the clock. 3:23 a.m. 15 minutes. That was all it took to set everything straight. 15 minutes to reclaim my life. 15 minutes to prove that betrayal could be faced without chaos. 15 minutes to see clearly. The night stretched long, but for the first time I didn't feel alone. I felt free. Betrayal doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it comes quietly, in smells, in hesitations, in tiny moments you think you're imagining. But trust is precise. It knows when to bend, and it knows when to break. That night, the 15-minute countdown wasn't just a timer. It was a lesson, a warning, a revelation. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I waited. I watched, and I let time do its work. The air was still. The clock ticked softly. Outside, the first hints of dawn were breaking over the horizon. I realized something important. Betrayal doesn't define the betrayed. It only defines those who let it. And I wouldn't. Because 15 minutes was all it took to see the truth, reclaim control, and finally, wake up. It wasn't lipstick. It wasn't a message. It was the smell, the faint trace of someone else, someone I never wanted her near, clinging to her clothes as she walked past me. And in that instant, everything I believed about us shattered. I had been sitting in the living room, pretending to scroll through my phone, pretending to ignore the clock on the wall. But I wasn't ignoring anything. I was waiting. I was already bracing myself. When she opened the door at 3:03 a.m., I smelled it immediately. The faint, sharp aroma of cologne that wasn't hers, that didn't belong in our home. She didn't knock. She didn't apologize for being late. She just walked in, confident as always. But the moment the scent hit me, that confidence faltered. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I let her pass. I let the silence speak. "Why are you home so late?" I asked finally, my voice calm but heavy. "Traffic," she said, tossing her bag onto the couch. I nodded slowly, pretending to believe her. But I couldn't. I had smelled it before. I had felt it in subtle ways for months, and now it was undeniable. It wasn't always like this. I remembered the first night I realized something was off. She had laughed a little too much at a text she received, her phone always face down, her eyes flickering nervously when I entered the room. I wanted to trust her. I really did. I told myself I was imagining things. But trust isn't blind. Trust sees, and it waits. And tonight it had waited long enough. I had watched her over the past weeks, noticing tiny inconsistencies, little excuses that didn't add up. And that smell tonight, it was proof I could no longer ignore. I stood up slowly and walked toward her. She looked up at me, her smile forced, her eyes searching. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice low. Not accusing, not yelling, just a question that carried every in I held inside. She froze. Her hands gripped the edge of the couch. What do you mean?" "The smell, the perfume, his cologne. You know exactly what I mean." Her face drained of color. Her confidence, the kind that had always unnerved me, slipped away. It's not like that," she stammered. I shook her head slowly. "It is like that. I've waited long enough for honesty. 15 minutes. That's all the time you have." Her breath caught. 15 minutes? What are you talking about?" 15 minutes to pack. 15 minutes to leave. Or 15 minutes to tell the truth. Your choice." As she moved toward the bedroom, memories of our early days flooded my mind. The nights we spent talking until sunrise, sharing dreams and secrets. The quiet mornings, coffee in hand, wrapped in each other's warmth. And now, the faint smell of another man had torn it all apart. I sat back on the couch and closed my eyes. I remembered the first red flag I ignored, the extra time on her phone, the unexplained absences, the distant gaze she wore more often than not. I had convinced myself it was nothing, but it wasn't nothing. And tonight the truth had arrived, uninvited, in the form of a scent I could never unsmell. She returned to the living room with a suitcase half packed, her hands trembling. "You can't do this," I said calmly. "I don't have to. The truth already did." She tried to speak, to explain herself. "It's complicated. I didn't mean—" 15 minutes, I interrupted. To pack? To leave? Or to tell me everything? Her eyes filled with tears. The woman who had once seemed untouchable now looked like someone I didn't recognize at all. The clock ticked on. I didn't move. I didn't plead. I didn't even look away. 3:10 a.m. 10 minutes left. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands buried in her hair, panic evident. I could hear the quick intake of her breaths, the shaking of her shoulders, the fight inside her mind. 3:15 a.m. 5 minutes. She zipped the suitcase shut and placed it by the door. She turned to me, desperation in her eyes. "Please, don't make me leave like this. I can explain, I swear, I can fix it." I studied her face, every micro-expression, every tremor of the lips. She had lied before. She might be lying now. The clock ticked on. I didn't move. I didn't plead. I didn't even look away. 3:21 a.m. 1 minute left. She sipped the last pocket of her bag, looked at me, and whispered, "I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't mean—" The final second passed. 3:22 a.m. I stood and walked to the door, holding it open. Cold air rushed in. She froze. For a moment, I thought she might throw herself at me, try to manipulate me one last time. But she didn't. She stepped out, carrying her bag, carrying the consequences of her choices, and I closed the door behind her. Silence settled in, heavy but clear. The house felt empty, yet calm. The tension had lifted. I sat back on the couch, listening to the quiet ticking of the clock. Outside, the night stretched long and still.
The smell was gone now, but the memory lingered. Not of betrayal, but of awakening. Sometimes the smallest thing, a scent, a hesitation, a glance, can break everything you thought you knew. And sometimes that same thing sets you free. Betrayal doesn't always arrive in dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it sneaks in, subtle and silent. A perfume, a touch, a whispered lie. But honesty and courage, whether in confrontation or self-respect, can reclaim what betrayal tried to steal. That night, the smell didn't just expose her mistake. It revealed my strength, my clarity, and the courage to let go. And as the first light of dawn crept through the window, I realized, sometimes the thing that breaks you is the same thing that saves you. She probably thought I would beg, that I would fall to my knees, hands raised, pleading for her to stay. But I didn't. All I said was one word, pack. And the silence that followed spoke louder than any scream ever could. The house was dark, except for the soft glow of the streetlight outside. I had been sitting in the living room, watching the minutes crawl by. Each tick of the clock felt like a heartbeat echoing the tension in the air. Then she walked in, her heels clicking lightly against the hardwood. The perfume she wore, someone else's scent, hit me first. A faint, sharp aroma that was impossible to ignore. She stopped mid-step, expecting me to react, to rage, to beg. But I didn't. I simply stood, steady, eyes fixed on her. Pack. 2 syllables.
No pleading. No anger.
Just the word. Her face paled. The confident, controlling woman I had known seemed to shrink in front of me. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. She opened her mouth again, stammering. Pack what? Are you serious? I nodded.
Calm.
Resolute.
Yes. Pack.
15 minutes. Then leave. Her eyes darted toward the clock. 15 minutes. Enough time to grab her things. Or enough time to confess, if she had any truth left to tell. She had thought I would beg. That I would plead, grovel, do whatever it took to keep her in my home, in my life. But I realized that begging for someone who didn't respect you only teaches them that you can be manipulated. It hadn't been sudden. There were signs I had ignored for months. The late nights, the hushed phone calls, the vague excuses, the emotional distance that grew between us like a shadow. I had told myself it was work stress, fatigue, or maybe I was overthinking. But deep down I knew. Every instinct, every quiet moment of observation had been screaming at me. And that night, the evidence was undeniable. The scent of him on her clothes was the final proof. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even accuse her. I just waited. She paced, unsure, glancing at the clock, then back at me. Her bag sat untouched on the sofa, like she was hoping for a reprieve that wouldn't come. "You can't be serious," she whispered, finally breaking the silence. "I am," I said. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in her eyes, replacing the arrogance and control she usually wielded like a weapon. She had miscalculated me. She had assumed my love for her would force me to beg, to fight, to compromise my dignity. But I had learned that self-respect is stronger than betrayal. She sank onto the couch, head in her hands. "It's not what it looks like," she said, voice trembling. "I've smelled enough. I've seen enough. I know enough," I replied. She looked up, desperate, trying to gauge if she could manipulate me one last time. "Please, I can fix this. I can explain everything." The clock ticked. 15 minutes. "Then start talking," I said. "Time is running out." Her shoulders shook. She took a shaky breath and began to explain. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was just pressure. From him. From work. From life. I thought I could handle it. I listened, and I felt the storm inside me build. Anger. Hurt. Heartbreak. Disappointment. All of it. But I didn't let it consume me. I stayed calm.
3:10 a.m.
5 minutes left. She zipped her bag. She shuffled through her drawers, taking only the essentials. Every movement betrayed her guilt and fear. She had thought she controlled everything. She hadn't counted on me standing firm, waiting for her to face the consequences.
3:12 a.m.
3 minutes. She walked back into the living room, looking at me like a child caught doing something they shouldn't. "Do you hate me?" she asked softly. "I'm disappointed," I said. Disappointed that the person I trusted the most thought I would beg to keep them. Disappointed that respect and honesty meant so little to you. She said nothing. She couldn't. The truth hung in the air, heavy, undeniable.
3:15 a.m.
1 minute. I could see the panic in her eyes. She wanted one last chance. One last plea for me to change the outcome. But it wouldn't come. The clock struck 3:16. Time was up. I walked to the door. She followed, bag in hand, trembling. She looked at me one last time. "You're really letting me go?" I didn't answer with words. I just held the door open. The cold night air brushed against her face. She stepped outside, carrying her own choices, carrying the weight of her decisions. I closed the door behind her. The silence settled over the house, heavy but clean. It was a silence filled with clarity, with resolve, with the finality of truth. I returned to the couch, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief because I had stood my ground. Sadness because the person I had trusted had betrayed me. I thought about what had happened, how a single word, pack, had shifted everything. It was enough to break the illusion, enough to reveal the truth, and enough to reclaim my life. Sometimes it's not yelling, not fighting, not chasing someone that proves strength. Sometimes the quiet, unwavering decision to demand. Honesty and self-respect is more powerful than any plea. She had thought I would beg. She had thought I would fall apart, that my love for her was stronger than my dignity. But love without respect is a prison, and I was done being imprisoned. That night, I learned that betrayal doesn't have to explode to be heard. Sometimes, a single word, a steady gaze, and a quiet boundary speak louder than any argument ever could. I had set the limit. She had reached it. And I had stood firm. The house was quiet. The air smelled faintly of the cold night outside, fresh and clear. I realized something important. Letting go doesn't mean losing. Sometimes, it's the only way to gain clarity, to reclaim your life, and to see yourself for who you truly are. I hadn't begged. I hadn't pleaded. I hadn't fallen apart. I had stood. And for the first time in months, I felt whole again. That night, after her confession, I realized the hardest part wasn't hearing the truth. The hardest part was facing my own blindness. The years I ignored the signs, the red flags I excused, the moments I let slip by thinking everything was fine. That night, I finally woke up. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. I had been sitting in the living room, nursing a half-empty glass of whiskey, pretending to think about work, about bills, about anything other than her. But I wasn't pretending very well. I could feel it in my chest, the weight of every unanswered question, every lie I had ignored, every silence I had accepted as normal. Then she came home. She didn't knock.
She didn't call.
Just opened the door with that casual confidence I had once admired, the confidence I now recognized as arrogance. And she smelled like him. The smell hit me first. Not strong, not overwhelming. Just there, subtle but unmistakable. A trace of someone else clinging to her as she walked past me. My heart sank, not with anger, not with shock, but with the painful realization that I had ignored the signs for far too long. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said, voice trembling. She avoided my eyes. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than any question I could have asked. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. He pressured me. I tried to stop, I swear I did. Pressure. Confusion. Excuses. I had heard them before. But hearing them now, after months of subtle betrayal, it hit differently. You could have told me, I said finally. Anytime. Before tonight. Before everything became this. She flinched. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to ruin us. I thought I could fix it without you knowing. The words echoed in the room. Fix it. Without me. Without us. That was it. That was the moment I realized the truth. I had been asleep in my own marriage. I had ignored the signs, ignored my instincts, allowed myself to believe everything was fine while my trust was eroding. I had excused her late nights, the distant texts, the subtle lies. I had told myself I was imagining things. I had hoped. I had waited. And in the process, I had given her power over me that she had no right to wield. That night, something inside me shifted. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Clarity. I wasn't angry yet. Anger comes later. First comes the awakening. First comes the recognition of reality. I stood slowly. She noticed, panic flickering in her eyes. What are you doing? Facing the truth, I said. And acting on it. She swallowed, trying to regain control. You can't just. I can, I interrupted. Because I finally woke up. And I won't let myself be blind anymore. Pack your things. 15 minutes. Then leave. Her face turned pale. Her confident, untouchable demeanor faltered. She had expected me to plead, to beg, to collapse under the weight of my own feelings for her. But I didn't. I had finally learned that love without respect is not love at all. She moved toward the bedroom, trembling, her hands shaking as she grabbed clothes, shoes, small personal items. She glanced at me constantly, searching for any sign of weakness, any plea that would allow her to manipulate me one last time. The clock ticked mercilessly. 15 minutes. Enough time to pack, enough time to confess, enough time for the truth to emerge fully, or for her to realize that some mistakes have consequences.
3:10 a.m.
10 minutes left. She zipped up her bag, her movements rushed and clumsy. I didn't speak. I didn't watch. I just let the time pass.
3:13 a.m.
3 minutes. Her face was wet with tears now. She came back into the living room, desperate. Please, I can explain. I can fix this. I swear I can make it right. I didn't move. I didn't answer with words. My silence was the answer. My calm presence, unyielding and firm, said everything she needed to hear. Some truths are too heavy to be denied, and some boundaries too firm to be crossed. It wasn't just about her betrayal anymore. It was about my own failure to see it sooner. My own blindness. My own habit of making excuses. That night, the realization hit me harder than any lie she had told. I had allowed myself to be blind because I wanted to believe. I had allowed myself to hope because I didn't want to face reality. But reality had a way of making itself known. And now I was awake. I finally understood that betrayal is not only about the one who strays, it's about the one who ignores the signs, the one who lets things slide, the one who pretends that silence equals loyalty.
3:15 a.m.
1 minute left. I stood by the door, watching her with a mixture of sadness and resolve. She zipped her suitcase for the final time, placed it by the door, and looked at me, eyes wide, searching for a final plea, a final emotional collapse. There was none. I opened the door. Cold air rushed in. She hesitated, then stepped out, carrying the weight of her choices. And I closed the door behind her, shutting the chapter that had held me asleep for far too long. The house was quiet again. The faint glow of the streetlight highlighted the emptiness I now felt, not just in the room, but in the months I had ignored reality. Yet in that emptiness there was clarity, freedom, power reclaimed. I didn't feel the heavy weight of anger yet. I felt the lighter, sharper clarity of someone who had finally opened their eyes. Sometimes, waking up isn't a sudden event. Sometimes it's a slow process. But that night, it was instantaneous. I had finally woken up. I had finally stopped ignoring the truth. Love without respect is not love. Trust without honesty is not trust. And patience without boundaries is not strength, it is submission. She had tried to manipulate me, thinking I would beg, thinking I would plead, thinking I would forgive without consequence. But I had woken up. And waking up doesn't just change the present, it changes everything that comes after. The night stretched long and still. I sat on the couch, letting the silence fill the house, letting the clarity settle into my bones. I had learned something important. It is not enough to endure betrayal silently. It is not enough to hope for change while ignoring the signs. Sometimes you have to wake up, look at the truth, and act. That night, I finally woke up, and nothing would ever make me blind again.